Most nurses who end up in front of the board of nursing weren't careless, they weren't dishonest, they were short-staffed. So picture this. You're at the end of a 12-hour shift. The next nurse calls out. Your charge nurse asks you to stay again, and you already know the floor is unsafe. You have a choice to make, and you have about 90 seconds to make it. Whatever you decide, you believe you're doing the right thing for your patients. Here's what almost no one tells you. That exact moment, the one where you're trying to do the right thing by everyone, is one of the most common ways a nursing license ends up under investigation in North Carolina. Not fraud, not diversion, a staffing decision made under pressure. If you watch what's happened across hospitals this year, you already know staffing is at a breaking point. And when the system breaks, the question regulators ask later isn't, was this unit understaffed? The question is, what did you do? I'm Nick Dogle, an attorney with North State Law here in Raleigh, North Carolina. A large part of what we do is professional license defense, representing the people who hold the licenses that hospitals, agencies, and boards depend on. If you're a registered nurse, an LPN, or nurse practitioner working anywhere in North Carolina, this is for you. Because the staffing crisis you're living through every shift isn't just an HR problem or a union problem. It can quietly become a licensing problem. And most nurses don't see that connection until a letter from the NC Board of Nursing shows up. My goal today isn't to alarm you, is to help you understand how these situations actually unfold, so the worst version of this never happens to you. Let's start with what the North Carolina Board of Nursing is actually trying to protect. Now, the board's job is not to be your employer's enforcement arm. Its mandate is patient safety, making sure that the public can trust that anyone holding a North Carolina nursing license is practicing safely and competently. That mission matters because it explains why staffing complaints get taken seriously. When a unit is stretched thin, patient safety is exactly what's on the line. So when something goes wrong on a short-staffed floor, the board simply doesn't note that the hospital is understaffed and just move on. It looks at the individual licensee and asks whether that nurse met their professional obligations. And here's what professionals consistently misunderstand. The hospital staffing failure and your professional duty are treated as two separate things. You can be 100% right that the assignment was unsafe. That happens a lot. And you can still find yourself explaining your conduct to a regulator. Understaffing is the backdrop. Your decision is the foreground. And that distinction is the spine of everything we're going to talk about. So let's talk about the rule that sits underneath almost every one of these situations: patient abandonment. In North Carolina, the Board of Nursing defines patient abandonment in plain terms as leaving an assigned patient without making arrangements for the continuation of equivalent nursing care. The key word there is assigned. The duty attaches once you've accepted the assignment and a nurse-patient relationship exists. From that point, you're responsible for those patients until another qualified licensed person takes over. Now, here's the part that surprises people, and it cuts in your favor. Refusing an assignment before you've accepted it is generally not the same thing as abandonment. Declining to stay past your scheduled shift is generally not abandonment. Even a no-call, no-show, so to speak, as bad as that is for your job, is generally treated by the board as an employment matter, not abandonment, because you never accepted those patients in the first place. What the board looks for is the break in the chain of care. Did a nurse who accepted responsibility just walk from it without handing those patients to somebody qualified? That's the line. In a staffing crisis, that line is exactly where good people stumble, because the pressure to, quote, just handle it or to just leave hits hardest at the very moment the chain is most fragile. Let me make this concrete. And to be clear, this is a hypothetical situation. This is not a real client. It's just an everyday situation that unfortunately occurs too often. Maria is a med-surg nurse. She's already taken report on 6 patients when her manager tells her 2 more are being added because a colleague went home sick. Maria knows 8 is too many for safe care on this unit, and she says so. She's frustrated, she's exhausted, and after a tense back and forth, she tells her charge nurse she can't do this and leaves the floor. Now, Maria did something completely understandable, but notice what happened from the board's point of view. She had already accepted 6 patients. That relationship existed. And when she left, the question becomes, did she make sure those 6 patients were handed off to another qualified nurse with a clear report before she walked out? Or did she leave the floor with the assumption that somebody would figure it out? That single difference, a documented, communicated handoff versus an abrupt exit, can be the difference between a defensible position and a complaint that lands on the board's desk weeks later, after a patient outcome no one anticipated. Same exhaustion, same unsafe unit, same good intentions, 2 very different risk profiles. So how does a bad shift turn into a license investigation? Usually in stages and usually slower than people expect. It often starts with an incident report or a patient complaint, sometimes filed weeks after the shift, sometimes tied to an outcome that happened after you left. The hospital does its internal review, and in a staffing crisis, there's an institutional incentive to frame the problem around an individual's choices rather than around systemic understaffing, because the individual is easier to point to. From there, a complaint can be referred to the board. Once that happens, you're no longer in an HR conversation. You're in a regulatory process. And the standard isn't, were you treated fairly by your employer? It's, did you meet your professional obligations to your patients? And this is where most nurses get themselves in trouble. Not in the original staffing situation, in what they do after it. The first mistake is over-explaining, because when a nurse gets that first call from a manager or an investigator, the instinct is to talk, to justify, to vent about the staffing, to explain how unfair the whole thing was. But a long, emotional explanation given without preparation often creates more problems than it solves, because every sentence becomes part of the record. The second mistake is fixing the chart after the fact. When a nurse realizes a shift looks bad, the temptation is to go back and clean up the documentation. Add a note, clarify a time, fill a gap long after your shift has ended. In our experience, this is potentially one of the most damaging things a professional can do, because a regulator who spots an after-the-fact change stops asking about the staffing and starts asking about your integrity. The original problem was about workload. Now it's about honesty. That's a far worse place to be. The third mistake is treating the board casually, assuming that because you didn't do anything dishonest, you don't need to take the process seriously. The process is the risk. Treating it lightly is how defensible situations become disciplinary ones. And the fourth is delegating without oversight. Handing off tasks in the chaos of a short shift without confirming the person is qualified and the handoff was clear, then assuming it is no longer your concern. So, what can you actually do? Generally speaking, the most protective habit is mindset. In a staffing crisis, think in terms of the chain of care, not just your own exit. Before you step away from patients you've accepted, the question to sit with is simple. Has responsibility for these patients clearly passed to another qualified person? What you can do to protect your license is to document your concerns in real time and through the proper channels. Putting your safety concerns about assignment in writing to the right people before and during the shift rather than reconstructing them afterwards. Contemporary, honest records tend to protect the nurse who raised the alarm. In many cases, the smartest decision is made before you respond to anyone. If you ever receive notice that a complaint has been filed, the period before you give your first statement is the moment that matters the absolute most. That's the window where preparation makes the biggest difference, and the window people most often waste by reacting emotionally. None of this means becoming defensive or adversarial on the floor. It means understanding that your license is yours. The hospital staffing decisions are not, and the two need to be protected separately. So here's the bottom line. A staffing crisis doesn't put your license at risk because you did something wrong. It puts your license at risk because it forces good nurses into impossible choices and then asks them to defend those choices alone. The takeaway is this: in the moment, protect the chain of care. After the moment, protect the record and protect yourself before you speak. This doesn't mean the board is out to get nurses. They're not. It means the process is unforgiving of the very pressure that the staffing crisis creates. And being aware of that is the first real protection you have. If you've received any kind of notice from the Board of Nursing, or you think one may be coming, the most useful thing you can do is get a clear, informed guidance before you respond to it, not after the fact. If videos like this are helpful, consider subscribing because we cover these professional licensing issues on a regular basis. This video is general educational information about professional licensing in North Carolina. It is not legal advice. It does not create an attorney-client relationship, and every situation is different. Nothing here predicts the outcome of any particular case.